Welcome to First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, the birthplace of congregational humanism. We carry on that tradition of free thought today, dedicated to promoting a free search for truth, meaning, and justice. Our web address is firstunitarian.org. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me to be here with you on this beautiful August morning. Bad air again, but it's still a beautiful day. We're in a beautiful place. We're hearing amazing music. For me, my garden is full of beauty and deliciousness right now. The days are still long enough that I don't feel stingy for daylight at the end of them. We're here with a chance to be still and to remember who we are, with the joy of chosen community around us. And yet, for many of us, even on a beautiful morning like this, uneasiness accompanies us always in these times. Uncertainty about what will happen next. Despair about the kidnappings and the steady drumbeat leading towards authoritarianism. Many of us are dysregulated, struggling to know where we even live anymore. It's hard when someone asks us casually how we are. For many of us, our health's in reasonably good shape, our families are okay right now, no one we know is in immediate jeopardy, and yet to smile and say fine feels as if we're not being completely authentic. How do we stay centered, and how do we live with love in the center of our lives when so many forces that undermine love are relentlessly at work every day? At the 2024 General Assembly, Unitarian Universalists affirmed for a second time by overwhelming majority a newly revised covenant among congregations. To be clear, this is not a faith statement for individuals and certainly not a creed. It is a statement of what binds our congregations one to another with shared values. Previously, the covenant that bound us was a statement of principles, and now it is 6 shared values. And I love that you share one of these each week in your service, because I'd venture that many of our congregations still don't even know they exist. This morning, we heard about one of those shared values, interdependence. That is listed with 6 others in no particular order after a preamble, which reads in part, "Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love." So this morning I want to explore what it means to live our values through the spiritual discipline of love. When I think about it, perhaps it's similar to what Carter Hayward said. Love does not just happen. We're not love machines. We're not puppets on the strings of a deity called love. Love is a choice. Love is a conversion to humanity, a willingness to participate with others in the healing of a broken world and broken lives. Love is a choice, a discipline we can practice. Now, I am one of the many Unitarian Universalists who are not exactly renowned for discipline. We do not sit silently on zafu cushions for hours, as some Buddhists do. We do not memorize Bible or Quran verses, as some Christians and Muslims do. We kind of interpret spiritual discipline pretty loosely, and we do it our own way. I remember years ago, Stephen Colbert was talking about us being called a cult, and he said, "I didn't know free to be you and me was cult language." And well, as I said, Article 2 does not dictate individual spiritual disciplines for Unitarian Universalists. To suggest that our congregations need to covenant together with these values without any of us individually thinking about what it means to practice them is kind of hard. It's like picturing a choir where everyone gets together to sing a song that none of them know. So this morning I want to share my own journey trying to keep love in the center. I invite you to reflect about this and see what fits for you and what doesn't, and how you might do it yourself. And before I even start that, I want to acknowledge that there are people maybe in this room who don't like this notion of keeping love in the center. As the co-moderator of the UUA, while this covenant was being redrafted, and it was a great privilege to get to work with others on it, I faced many angry people over 4 years. And one surprising thing someone said to me once was, "Why is the UUA trying to force us to be Christians? Love is the language of Christianity." Before I could open my mouth, another person in the room with a Jewish heritage took great exception to what had just been said and said, "How dare you say that? Jews have always put love in the center." Indeed, I've heard the same thing claimed over the years by Muslims, Sikhs, atheists, and pretty much everyone else. So I want to be clear that as we drafted this new iteration of the covenant, no one ever thought of practicing love as a spiritual discipline, meaning allegiance to any particular spiritual language or practice or metaphor system. I also want to say that I'm grateful to people like Carter Hayward and James Baldwin and Bell Hooks and others for articulating over and over that love is not a fuzzy, warm feeling. I don't know about the rest of you, but I don't feel particularly fuzzy and warm a lot these days about the choices our leaders are making. My own inner reality is much more aligned with, I think, what James Baldwin meant when he said, "Love is a battle, love is a war, love is growing up." He also said, "If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see." Of course, he wrote this before social media made it so possible for all of us to see only exactly what we want to see and to avoid anything we don't want to see. Still, I hold out hope that love can make us all more conscious, can transform us, especially when I consider my own life experience. I was privileged to study with Carter Hayward when I lived in Boston, and I served the UUA there. One class I took was liberation theology, and one assignment she gave us was to write about how our race impacted our theology and beliefs. This was early in the 1990s, and I found the assignment impossible. I had no idea. I wrote about being Appalachian, a lesbian, fat. I had no concept that I even had a race. A white racial identity meant nothing to me, and I had no idea how it impacted my beliefs. Though I wasn't taking the class for credit, I was devastated when she told me I'd failed the assignment. It was the first of many times when I realized how little I knew about what it means to live as a white person in a racist country, despite endless workshops on anti-racism. I could not be more grateful than I am to all of the people in the following years who have loved me enough to make me conscious of something I couldn't see. And I have to say, for white people who have white fragility and are very sensitive about having things pointed out to us, I could only wish that every one of you lived with a teenager who was a very conscious person of color, because you would get over it very fast. Because you would be told day after day after day how much your whiteness impacted your worldview. And pretty soon you'd stop feeling defensive about it and be grateful to have a bigger worldview. That's how my consciousness changed. It evolved day after day. Whether it's about understanding the social construct of race or gender or disability, every time it's been because someone cared enough about me to help me, whether because we were in a relationship or I read what they wrote or saw some art, to learn something I didn't know. It's never been one big eureka moment where I had total insight. And probably some of the people who impacted me ended our conversations shaking their heads and thinking they had no impact, not knowing that the conversation we had would play over and over and come up in different moments until it began to make sense to me. So I remain eternally grateful for all of those moments of teaching, all of those tiny moments that have helped me to grow a soul and live my faith. And of course, there are people who can't reach us and who we can't reach. Years ago, a fundamentalist neighbor of mine had a radical transformation and renounced the religion she'd been trying to force on the rest of us for decades. I asked her afterwards if there was anything I could have said to her that would have made an impact and helped her to change earlier. She looked at me and went, "You? No." "Nothing," she said. She meant that I was an out lesbian, and she regularly told me the evils of my ways and predicted my eternity in hell, something which, having grown up Unitarian in West Virginia, took nothing off of me because it happened since childhood. So I was like, my mom said, it's so sad they're afraid of something that doesn't even exist. I wish every kid could go home to that mom, that Unitarian belief. Anyway, she continued, I didn't want to know what you thought, but I watched you. I watched, and I saw that you were kind to your neighbors, and you helped out in the neighborhood, and you were kind to your kid, and you laughed, and you seemed happy. And it created some dissonance between who I'd been told you were and who you were. Sometimes the drip, drip, drip of a tiny faucet eventually combines with other forces to create the gush needed for transformation. And I know that everyone in this room is located in different communities with different people, and we each have to make our own decisions about how to spend our energy and how to engage with other people who seem like they're not listening. I've personally decided that keeping love in the center includes loving myself enough not to be in conversations with people who are bullying or using violent language. Some days, despair and numbness wear me out, and I can hardly find it in myself to care about anything. In those times, I start by caring about what's easiest, my garden, the four-legged ones I live with. A friend of mine says, I stay away from the people and go for the animals right now. A friend, a good book. If I start to get stuck in the energy of despair, I don't like that. So one thing that I do is I think about the wisdom of people who have lived with so much more oppression for so long, and the privilege that I carry as a white cisgender woman with enough resources to be okay. And so I look to what people have created or what they say who have lived with greater oppression and systemic injustice for far longer. Indigenous people, Black people, others who have faced what might seem to be hopeless situations. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote, "Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love." Certainly the powers we see running our government are reckless and abusive without love. We may feel that any response we have is weak and anemic, if not sentimental. Part of the spiritual discipline of love, for me, means believing in its power even when it's hard to find it reflected in any response from those who are reckless and abusive. As unsatisfying as it may feel, I have to accept that nothing I can do individually can begin to balance the massive amounts of cruelty and oppression in the world. Therefore, I try to harness my own energy to the spiritual practice of love without expectation. And as I do, I keep my eye on what systemic and collective liberation can look like, so that my individual actions are aligned with collective liberation. I look for teachers I trust. I read and watch and listen to perspectives of people who are going to tell me what I can do and help me to remember I'm not alone, even as I absorb the day's horrors. I look for organizers, artists, thinkers, people I know, alive people, dead people, children, elders. For instance, Bell Hooks, a womanist writer who wrote extensively about the power of love. I go back to her books. Bell Hooks identifies several key ingredients for love, including care, commitment, knowledge, responsibility, respect, and trust. I appreciate a list like this because then I can work with and poke around in each of those ingredients as I'm able, some days being harder than others. Each of those ingredients is a struggle, and if maybe you've picked up by now that I'm not preaching this because I feel like I've got it together, I'm preaching it because we all need to think about it so much. So take knowledge, for instance. I don't know about you, but there are days when I'm just not able to absorb one more horrible thing, when I avoid the news like it's kryptonite. Knowledge for me is not only taking in facts or some facts about who's doing what on a daily basis, it's also knowing what's going to happen when I absorb those facts. When I start to feel numb or rageful, I know it's time to go in the garden and put my energy in and get my energy from the earth, or watch some women's basketball, or go other places that give me joy and strength. I also really prioritize knowledge from the communities that are most affected by what's going on right now. So there's a balance in what I need to know and what I can let roll by, which will be very different from what each person in this room needs to know. As I've mentioned, I'm very careful about where and from whom I take in news. Misinformation and disinformation are everywhere these days, and I have no patience for it. Or take the idea of commitment. What that looks like shifts regularly. There are times when I'm inspired to write letters, go to protests, call my elected representatives, and that feels like commitment. But I don't do that every day. My commitment has to be deeper than that, than any action or inaction. It needs to be baseline reality for me. Just the way I know I'm committed to my spouse every day without meaning that every moment of the day I'm doing something to live that commitment out very actively. My own limitations of age and ability factor into what I commit myself to now. But I need to do enough to know that I am living the commitment. Years ago, I was leading a workshop, and I asked a group of UUs, how many of you are activists? And a woman said, in our heads? And I said, I'm an Olympic gymnast in my head. Activism in our heads isn't going to help anyone else, but we do need to start with our own internal commitment and intention and work out from there. Having a group of people we trust can deepen our commitment and help us to live outside of our heads. I was raised, as I mentioned, Unitarian in Charleston, West Virginia. In 1965, my parents sold our house to a black family when we moved. To say it was not popular in my neighborhood, I couldn't even think of an analogy. It was not popular. When I asked my mom later where she got the courage to do that, she said from the people at the Unitarian Fellowship. She said it would have taken more courage not to do it. Community can bolster our commitment and give us the courage to live it in the world. For me, in the list Bell Hooks provides, the most central ingredient right now is care. Because we are literally told day after day by people in power that care is stupid, makes us weak, is a liability. We are shown that day after day. Knowing who and what we care about is essential, and we need to go places that allow us to care more, that deepen our sense of care, whether it's petting the cat, weeding the garden, telling friends that we love them. I know that I and many people I know were suddenly really compelled to get together with friends and tell each other we loved each other when the administration changed. I have to stop what I'm doing on my phone and listen when someone's talking to me. Putting care in the center of my life feels essential, including caring for the people who are most targeted right now. It's easy for me to care for transgender people who are cruelly and consistently targeted because people in my family and friendship circle have been trans for decades. I have to work harder to stay connected to the assaults on immigrant communities because those connections are not as deeply embedded in my daily life, and I don't want my care to be distant and abstract. We're lucky in the Twin Cities that there are so many places that we can plug in and do concrete things to help, whether it's delivering diapers to someone not safe to leave their house, or witnessing ICE raids. There are so many things we can do, and I hope everyone's thinking about how to care right now. For me, magnifying care has also meant bringing more young kids into my life. Nothing enhances my sense of care for and commitment than young children, because I'm old. I've had a long, good life. It's been pretty good. But when I look at young children and think about the world they're coming into, they remind me both of magic and vulnerability, and it raises my commitment. Thinking about what other people will live through is critical to our sense of responsibility and care. And in order to care, I also need to experience real time with collective care and see what it looks like. That's one reason I think our congregations are so important. My pet and my garden and my individual friendships hold me, but they're not enough. I just can't do a sermon right now without this. One of the places I go for an experience of collective care is women's basketball. I've become, as my kid says, a bro. The WNBA. Our local, any women's basketball fans in the room? Okay, good. All right. Because I can get real boring. I promise I won't go on too long. But our local team, the Lynx, if you don't know it, are way ahead in first place in the whole league. And they talk and exhibit repeatedly about the reason they're so good is because they're always caring for each other. It's not about egos and stars. And you see it when they play for each other, how they look out for each other. I also love women's basketball because it's about strong, skillful, resilient women, many of them Black, many of them queer. Watching the games helps me to center in a vision of the world as I think it should be, where setting aside bad referees, which is another talk, skill and talent and resilience matter and are rewarded, where care for one another leads to victory, where quirky individuals can be their full selves regardless of gender or race or sexual orientation. I never thought I would become the sports fanatic I am, only about this sport, and yet here I am. Because it's an alternate vision of what people can do together, who people can be together, and it gives me strength to face the dominant reality, which is so different. Of course, you will embody these aspects of love or others that are more important to you in different ways. I'm not suggesting the way I do it is correct or universal. I'm just here to remind us that the power of our love matters right now, and that we can help each other to remember and to practice love as a spiritual discipline. When I feel hopeless, the image that I turn to is the Buddhist concept of dependent co-arising. This is the Buddhist way of talking about interdependence. The Buddhists say, because this happened, that could happen. Because this did not happen, that did not happen. It says we're all part of the thises and the that's that create this beautiful, heartbreaking web we're in. Individually, our tiny acts of resistance and reparation may and will feel completely inadequate. Only when we come together and weave ourselves together in powerful ways can we bring love to life. I am so grateful to have been given a life where I know who my people are. How lucky I am to have Unitarian Universalist friends, colleagues, and communities to help me stay centered in love in these hideously difficult days and to call me back when I'm not. Thank you for being part of this web. May our practice of love get stronger every day.
Thanks for listening. You can find much more about humanism and what's happening at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis by visiting our website at firstunitarian.org.